Chapter 44, Galvanize. The spark didn't work. But it did. A different kind of spark. The spark ignited inside me when I realized that you all are my friends. Faith. We are all called, at one time or another, to have faith. Faith in the goddesses. Or faith in pony kind, as Velvet Remedy was struggling to retain. Or, as with Homage, it is faith in heroes, and the value of the good fight. Sometimes, the faith you are called upon to have is faith in yourself. Faith doesn't require us to be willfully blind or dogmatically stupid, but it does require us to take risks, to put our trust in something we know might not be true, even when the cost of failure could be very high, especially then. For some of us, faith becomes our central reason for living, for pressing on. Faith is what allows us to believe in a happy ending, even in our moments of greatest sorrow. It is what allows us the hope of rescue, even in the most suffocating of darkness. And faith, more than anything else, is what the wasteland is ravenous to devour. More than kindness, more than innocence. The wasteland does its best to tear away your ability to believe in anything other than itself. When you no longer believe things can be better, when you stop trying, that's when the wasteland has won. The wasteland can kill us, but so long as we are dying while we try, as long as we die believing, then its success against us is a Pyrrhic victory at best. I have been thinking of a story Spike had told us that night in the cave. One of the many tales of the mares before the ministries. This particular tale was about the time when Twilight Sparkle's magic had failed her. Do you know any spells for turning a hydra into a mouse? How about a squirrel? No. No small rodents of any kind. And she had been asked to rely on Pinkie Pie's irrational sense, the Pinkie sense. You'll be fine. It's your only hope. You have to take a leap of faith. I am, almost certainly, about to die. This is my leap of faith. 2 days ago. It's time to end this. I thumped my forehoof on Zecora's table for emphasis, causing my Sparkle Cola Rad to bounce. The contents of the bottle fizzled brightly. I still had the soda from when? Just after Old Appaloosa, wasn't it? Found it in the wreckage of Ditsy Doo's original delivery wagon. Goddesses, that felt like so long ago. Well, I might as well drink it now. I wasn't expecting a lot of opportunities later. It was the wee hours of the morning. When we arrived at Zecora's hut yesterday evening, Lifebloom and Velvet Remedy had done everything they could for Reggie. Fortunately, her wounds only mimicked those caused by magical energy, and through exhaustive work, they had been able to heal her. But the trauma and the restoration had taken a great deal out of her. Lifebloom had warned us that she needed rest, a lot of it, and wouldn't be in any condition to continue with us for a good while. Right now, she slept on the cot next to Zenith's, the one we kept the Hellhound on the previous night. Most of us, including myself, had taken the chance to get some sleep. Even Calamity took a nap before tending to very important hat recovering. The escapees, those who hadn't left on their own, had bedded down outside. The followers of Red-Eye on the one side of the hut, everypony else on the other. Several of the ponies from the Overcast's prison had worked together to dig a grave for the foal who had died in captivity. The child's mother fashioned a remembrance marker by putting a stone from an ash-clogged stream not far away and wrapping it in vines of softly glowing phantasmal flowers. I've been waiting for this, Calamity whispered to Velvet Remedy, who turned her surprised expression to him. While ago, Lil Pip promised me we'd find a way to make this all death and destruction worth something, he explained, and she opened her muzzle to ask. Lil Pip's got a plan. Ugh, I can't believe you're planting to drink that, the albino hellhound muttered. I still wasn't entirely sure why he was with us, especially now that he could run, or dig, away. I expected that he was why at least some of the ponies elected to stay outside. Not that it would, help should he turn hostile, but instead, he seemed almost genial, particularly towards Velvet, whose face he nearly severed not one day ago. That shiny crud makes a better explosive than a drink. Calamity's ears tilted. It make a better what now? If you drink it, I'll show ya. Calamity looked about as comfortable with and trusting of the new friendly hellhound as I was. He turned to focus back on me, although he kept casting sidelong glances in the hellhound's direction. Little Pip, what are you planning? Velvet Remedy asked, sounding both curious and a little put off that this was the first she knew about this. Calamity quickly whispered assurances to the mare he loved, insisting that I'd been keeping everything hush-hush, and that he didn't even know. The single Pegasus project, I told my friends, and the assorted strangers in the hut with us. We're going to bring back the sun. Only Calamity looked unsurprised, and there were a fair number of gasps. You're going to bring back the sun. Lifebloom sounded like he couldn't possibly have heard that correctly. Yes! I thumped the table again, the Sparkle Cola rad hopping further away. We could see Celestia's sun, feel her warmth again. Everypony? I looked at Velvet Remedy. Something you said a while ago really struck with me. I told her. You said that you can't really stop something bad until you take away its reason for existing. I watched as she sat down and slowly recalled that memory of being in Calamity's embrace, breaking down after the horror we stumbled upon at Fluttershy's cottage. The Enclave exists because of the Cloud Curtain. That's the source of their control, through a stranglehold on crops and information. Without it, the Enclave will cease to exist. I knew that was hardly going to be an immediate effect, and so did they. Open the sky, and then we'll be able to stop all the Pegasi who look down, and then decide to buck off the government, who has lied to them, I proclaimed. Open the sky, and they'll no longer have a reason to slaughter ponies out of fear that one of us might remove their precious clouds. Open the sky, Velvet interrupted cautiously, and the Pegasi will starve. We can't do that. I paused, then nodded slowly. I know, and we won't. I smiled as I looked at my friends, a smile that hid the chill in my heart. That's what makes us different from Red-Eye. Well, one of a great many things. Red-Eye would have just blasted the Cloud Curtain away. We need to get in, analyze the situation, and trigger a cloud sweep from as many of the towers as we can, without causing famine. For how long? Calamity asked, clearly concerned. The Enclave's kept population down so that every pony can eat comfortably on what they can provide, plus food to stockpile. You cut the farmland in half, they'll be able to make up that stockpile for maybe a year. Then, you got a crisis. They ain't ready to live on scraps like we do down here. Y'all will have ponies starving to death while others hoard. Pegasi raiding parties, taking what they can from the towns below. Calamity shook his head. I tell you, we do this, it's gonna be a bloody mess. Maybe for a little while, I admitted, but I assured him, I know a way to fix that. I just can't talk about that part just yet, but I'll tell you tomorrow. We've got to meet some people first. Calamity leveled a prolonged stare at me. Then, his expression brightened. That's my girl. Velvet Remedy cleared her throat, and Calamity jumped to rephrase. Not my girl, my girl. I mean, not like my mare. I just meant... Then he caught her snicker and shut up, blushing. Lightbloom was still wrapping his mind around what I'd said. You're going to give us back the sun. Not just me. I smiled at the buck. I'm going to need all the help I can get. When Homage started calling you the Lightbringer, did she know? He asked, the question driving a wedge of pain in my heart. For a moment, I couldn't speak. I could only shake my head. 2 problems, little Pip, Calamity stated. First, you can't get in. And second, you can't even get in to get in. Not only is the SPP Central Hub shielded by that grand motherfucker of all alicorn shields, something that no pony has ever been able to breach, but it's surrounded by the Enclave's Nervo military base. And it's shielded by a blue dome. The blue dome? Calamity sighed. Remember when the Enclave captured us and they had us in those blue energy cages? He asked, prodding my memory. The first thing I remembered was Ditzy-Doo's prodding of the shield. Zap. Ow. And I had to prevent myself from snickering. The Enclave erected a huge protective dome, just like that, all over Navarro. He glanced towards the sleeping form of Reggie. Keeps out rogue griffins and the like. You got plans to get through those? Stealth mission? Velvet Remedy asked wearily. Actually, I admitted, I was thinking something closer to a direct attack. Dead, stunned silence. Broken first by the Hellhound. And you let her make the plans? He leveled a weary stare at Calamity and Velvet. On purpose? I tried to head off the coming avalanche of protests. Look, the moment they know we're there, they will start bringing the full might of that base to bear, I claimed reasonably, and we won't last minutes against that. Ah, and thus the full frontal assault makes sense. Lightbloom rolled his eyes. Makes our deaths quicker. I shot him a look. We're not Red-Eye. We don't have a force for a sustained battle. The way I see it, we have 2 options. Either pull off the most flawless stealth mission ever. I could read in their expressions how likely they all believe that wasn't. Or we pull a small smash and grab that gets us to our objective before they know what's hit them. Ah, surgical strike, Calamity suggested, pondering. Could work, assuming you can find a way past the 2 shields. I nodded eagerly, looking to the others. So, who's in? She asks, without even telling us half the plan, Calamity snarked, exchanging amused looks with Velvet Remedy. Smiling back at me, he proclaimed, We are, of course. I'm not. The albino cyber hellhound growled slightly. Attacking the winged pony base in the clouds? That's a long way to fall. I flinched. I stared at the hellhound, and he returned my gaze, his eyes boring into me for a moment. He knew. Still, I know someone who might be able to help you, he offered reluctantly. If the winged ponies ain't killed you yet, he added, and you can rescue hellhounds as good as you rescue ponies. I wasn't sure if he was challenging my skill or my willingness. Who? Fluffykins, he said. She was a warclaw, one of our fiercest. Used to run the biggest pack around Old Orne. before your enclave snatched her up. The albino shrugged. Long time ago, before they came with their magic noises. A test subject, Calamity concluded, for the Enclave's behavior control experiments. Most likely, she's dead. But if not, you let her loose, and she'll take care of any Pegasi she can find. As an afterthought, he told Calamity, don't be one for 'em. Fluffykins. Reggie chuckled groggily, surprising all of us. I had no idea when the adolescent griffin had slipped out of sleep. Scourge of the Enclave. She looked beeringly at us. I'm in. No, Lifelum told her. You're not. You're not going to be in anything but a bed for at least a week. The two of them glared challengingly at each other. I started to look at Velvet Remedy. Calamity, already focusing on the task at hand, inquired, Okay, little Pip, what's first? First, I paused, tapping the tip of my hoof on the table. First, we have to get the ponies outside to safety. I want to take them to Junction R7. So, I guess, first we need transportation. I challenged Calamity. Think we can get the tortoise back up and flying? Calamity snorted. And here I thought you might ask me for something hard. He turned and nodded towards the wing Velvet had bound in a cast. We don't call them flying sky tanks for nothing. The armor on that damn thing nearly stopped a shot from an anti-machine rifle. If it hadn't, I'd have lost more than just the use of a wing. He frowned seriously. Crash did more damage to us than the tortoise, I'll bet. But if we get it fixed, I won't be able to fly it. I nodded, sadly. Then, on impulse, I trotted over and gave Calamity a fierce hug. We'll figure something out. There were a few Pegasi amongst the captives we had rescued from the Enclave's Thunderhead. Maybe one of them we could ask to help. Velvet Remedy got up, walking past me. Little Pip, could I have a word with you? In private? I gulped. I gave Calamity a worried look, and he just shrugged. He was wearing the same exact expression I always pictured a father would wear while his wife insisted their daughter swallow helpful but icky-tasting medicine. Velvet Remedy was walking out of the hut. I paused and started trotting after her. As soon as I stepped hoof out the doorway, the cyber-leg hellhound moved, swiftly crossing the room and taking up the doorway. I jumped back as he blotted out the light coming from the room inside, kicking up my eyes forward sparkle. Little Pip, he said, with an almost whispered hiss. Ain't no small thing. You're intending to bring back the moon under the blanket of gems. Blanket of... Oh, he meant the stars. All this time, I've been so focused on the idea that I was bringing back the sun. But I had forgotten that what I was doing would return so much more to Equestria, or that there might be those for whom the gift of the night sky would hold a much greater significance. Goddess Luna, I thought, must be so very disappointed in me. You do this, and even I might forgive you. A little. I stared at him, paralyzed. He did know. As if reading my thoughts. Hellhounds can't do that, right? The albino hellhound growled. The Splendid Valley packs declared themselves at war with ponies. When you're at war, you don't get to complain when the enemy kills you. He glared at me sternly. I don't blame you for 'em. But the Ghost Farms pack? The Pegasi put 'em down there just to die, just like Red-Eye did with those unicorns. His next words hit me like a sledgehammer. Wouldn't I notice which ones you didn't rescue? Autumn Leaf had forced peaceful hellhounds into battle, and then had his own guns fire on their positions. He had intended them to die while helplessly driven against their will. If anything, his unrepenting, callous disregard of their lives had been a final, clear signal that even as he cried out for rescue, he had no regard for the lives of others. But the truth was, I hadn't tried to save them either. I couldn't, I told the hellhound sadly. They were violent. I don't have anything like Velvet's spell, and if just one of them slipped out of my telekinesis, something I knew that would be all too easy. All one would have to do was get close enough to a wall to shove it off, and they could push themselves out of my levitation field and kill one of the unicorns. Their collars would have gone off, and we'd all have been dead. The truth was, I couldn't have saved both, and I chose these unicorns over the hellhounds. Unicorns who had been the faithful allocates of Red-Eye and his new unity over the peaceful hellhounds who had been tortured by the Enclave. Yes, because then they will be free-willed, hyper-aggressive creatures who have just suffered mind control at the hooves of ponies. Life Bloom had reminded us. Far less dangerous. I wish I could have, I admitted, but I couldn't rescue both. And yes, I chose the ones who wouldn't likely slaughter the rest of the ponies I was rescuing. Or, hopefully, any pony else. Because if I had rescued them, knowing that they would slaughter more ponies, just like if I had let Autumn Leaf go, then I wouldn't be at least partially responsible for everyone they killed afterwards. Zebra logic was, perhaps, not so insane, after all. Velvet Rim was waiting for me at the edge of the glade of phantasmal flowers. With a sigh, I lowered my head. My gaze turned to the semi-friendly hellhound. Your people have every reason to hate me, but I really am trying to do the right thing, the best I can. That, I could only assume, was the coldest of comforts. But I had to say it. I had to say something. I'm sorry that I haven't been able to do better. Another thought occurred to me. After this, the Pegasi will have plenty of reason to hate me too. I felt sudden empathy for Scootaloo. To save Equestria, I become the villain of the piece. I moved slowly away from him, turning my gaze to Velvet Remedy. As I started to move towards her, the albino hellhound hissed again. You do this. You give us back the moon and the jewels of the night, and maybe we'll have reason to see you as more than a villain, too. He coughed hesitantly, then added, And maybe I know another who could help you. Tell me when you are gathering, where you are gathering, and maybe I'll send him your way. I stopped, my body suddenly a battleground. My head loved the idea of another ally, a hellhound no less, and my heart leapt at the chance to do better. But my gut churned uneasily at the idea of giving the location, a rendezvous for the ponies who had the fate of Equestria in their hooves, to a monster whom I really didn't trust. The Enclave had enslaved them and sent them to die. I chose not to help. And all this after Splendid Valley, the long history of the place, and the way I had written its final chapter. Why would a hellhound ever help a pony? I looked at the albino hellhound, my eyes drifting to his shiny new cyber leg, and I knew the answer. Because of Velvet Remedy. I wasn't quite willing to trust him, but I was going to give him a chance. So I told him instead about a hardware store near a passenger wagon stop in Fetlock. Today, the first shot was fired less than an hour after dawn. I don't think any pony will ever know by who. But that shot lit the fire. 2 massive armies charged forward, over the Badlands outside Philadelphia. The orifices of the enclave Thunderhead Glorious Dawn opened, and spewed the black carapace plague that swarmed down from the sky. Hundreds of battle-armored unicorns and earth ponies, a great many of them survivors of the pit, galloped to meet them, firing assault weapons and high-powered rifles with enhanced bullets. Griffins soared in the skies from the Philadelphia wall, anti-machine rifles firing at each target of opportunity. More than a dozen raptors swooped in, their energy weapons turning Pinkie Pie balloons into flying infernos. The first 4 crossed over the wall when Stern unleashed her biggest surprise. Though badly wounded, Red-Eye's Cyberdragon had survived the fight in the Everfree Forest, and for reasons only it could know, it still fought for Equestria, and it was pissed. The first of the raptors was torn apart in a whirlwind of violence. The sound of heavy, cruel thunder drummed the earth as the glorious dawn descended into the fray. 2 days ago. Calamity's under the impression that you killed his brother. Velvet told me directly. I need to know. Did you? Should I lie? Should I spare my friend's pain? No, I'd been down that road before. Lying to my friends, especially Velvet, tended to turn out badly. Yes. She stared at me quietly. I was trapped in an unpleasant déjà vu. Hadn't I just had this conversation? I interrupted her silence. And before you tried telling me, I should have given him a chance. You didn't see him down there. And you didn't see Friendship City. My voice was slowly rising. He had chances. You have to want to change. Or at least show a shred of remorse, or decency, or something. Like you wanted to change? Her soft voice sliced through the growing storm of my rant. I shut up, staring back at the mare who had shot me, and in doing so, saved my life. Deflating, I said simply, if I had let Calamity's brother go, he would have likely sought revenge on all the wasteland. He had no regard for the lives of others, and Red-Eye gave him every excuse he needed to turn his Operation Cauterize into something more like quarantine and incinerate. What was she suggesting we could have done? Kept him paralyzed while we tried to indoctrinate him with our morals? Memory therapy? My mind dredged up some of the less comfortable implications about the Ministry of Peace. Then I stopped myself. Velvet Remedy hadn't suggested anything. All she did was ask the question. I was the one who galloped off with a questionable direction, my mind still wrapped up in talk with the Hellhound. Taking a deep breath, I said, I'm sorry. What was it you wanted to say about it? Velvet shook her head. Well, first, I wanted to see how you were holding up, she told me. And now I have a fair idea. I moaned, lifting a hoof to my face. She was concerned about me, and probably concerned about my friendship with Calamity. I cantered over to stare at the beauty of the softly glowing phantasmal flowers, their vines covering the ground in what looked like a maze of insects. Well, there was plenty of concern to go around. Attempting to shift the subject, I countered. How about you? You let yourself be captured by the enemy to help a hellhound who tried to use you as a hostage. I couldn't hide my disbelief, or my worry. That was not a smart decision. As the princess of stupid decisions, I should know. What were you thinking? I imagined myself in his position, Velvet Remedy confessed, as she walked up right next to me. She lowered her head to sniff one of the flowers before she continued. Surrounded by hellhounds, missing a leg. My only chance of survival, or recovery, dependent on some pony willing to risk their life for my sake. She smiled. Strangely, it wasn't that hard to imagine. I blinked. Whoa, hold the reins. That wasn't the same. Not even close. No, she admitted openly, but there were enough smaller elements that I had little difficulty imagining what the poor boy was going through. Poor boy, the albino Delft machine? And I knew that. While I could never be so selfish as to ask another to risk themselves like that, I would secretly be praying for the goddesses that some pony would. The look she gave me reminded me a lot of the look she gave me back in the boxcar nearly 2 months ago. But this was a more mature, wiser version of that look. How could I not do it for him? What I knew I'd be praying some pony would do for me. That he would do for me, should our situations be reversed. I thought about that. As I did, my curiosity snuck up on me, and I found myself with my nose in the phantasma flower patch. The flowers did smell good. An ethereal floral scent that held a suggestion of mint. He wouldn't, you know, I told her. Should it matter? I took a moment to reflect, thinking of the things I had done, and for whom. Thinking most recently of braving the Everfree Forest, the Enclave, and Red Ice Cathedral to save unicorns who were, in many cases, willing followers of Red Eye, who didn't stick around to say thank you, some of whom resented me. I didn't even notice the lack of thanks, more concerned with their safety as they departed alone into the Everfree Forest. And even now, I didn't miss it. No, they would not have done the same for me, but that didn't matter. No. Today. This is boring, Reggie complained as she turned and plowed into another bank of clouds, driving it back. Below, a maze-like swath of gray appeared. A small glimpse of the ruins of Manhattan. There's an actual battle going on. Just keep at it, Godwinna ordered. These clouds won't clear themselves. It was proving harder than she'd expected. The cloud curtain kept trying to seal the gaps, filling in almost as quickly as they tore them apart. Blackwing, Butcher, watch your flanks. You have a black drift moving in. To make it worse, many of the clouds were changing or charging. A thunderstorm had been building over Manhattan last night. Reggie turned again, slicing into a thicker cloud with her right wing, attempting to cut it down into a more imaginable bundle. She yelped as the cloud zapped her, making her feathers flare out awkwardly, smoke curling from the edges of her wing. Damn it! The 6th Pegasi Enclave Patrol seemed to come out of nowhere. Brightly colored beams of pink and green laced through the air, 2 of them striking Godwinna in the breast of her armor. Mother! Reggie called out in alarm, pulling out her twin calamity guns and returning fire. I'm fine, Godwinna called back, drawing her tri-barreled magical energy shotgun as she dove behind the cloud bank. 3 of the armored Pegasi kept firing. Clouds were good for obscuration, but they made for useless cover. Their concentrated fire quickly vaporized the clouds. God wasn't there. The Pegasi swung around, alerted by the EFS compass, as God burst up through the clouds behind them. It saved 2 of them. God unloaded the 3 barrels into the breast of the 3rd, burning through his armor and into his heart. A crack of thunder tore through the air, and a second Pegasus was ripped apart, severing limbs, spinning off. The cloud misted with red. Say hello to little Gilda, Busher whooped. The remaining Pegasus, on God, backed up, firing rapid blasts of blue and gold from the multi-gem minigun in her armor. God grunted at the effort, forcing her body to move more quickly than it wanted to. 3 of the strikes tore along her left leg, igniting her body in pain. She swept the magical shotgun around to fire again. One of the other Pegasi dived at Reggie. She brought up her guns, but he was too fast, spinning and bucking her in the face as she fired twin beams of pink at Butcher. One of the beams struck the Talon heavy gunner squarely, and Butcher dissolved into pink ash. Little Gilda tumbling down through the closed hole in the clouds and disappearing from sight. "Fuck!" Reggie yelled, her head spinning. One of her eyes swelled closed. She spun, trying to recover, attempting to bring her pistols back to bear. The Pegasus looped around to face her, just in time for the adolescent Griffin to get her aim. Reggie fired both guns into the visor of the Enclave trooper, just as his poisonous scorpion tail sunk through her Talon armor and into her back. The Pegasus god had fired on melted away in a liquid stream of green, dissolving the front of her and revealing her daughter as Reggie dropped down through the clouds. "Reggie!" God screamed. 2 days ago. We had just started back towards Zecora's hut when the Alicorns appeared. Leading them was a midnight blue Alicorn with a flowing, silky mane of very light blues, like frost, that reminded me distinctly of Trixie. I had dropped into a battle stance, ready to dodge lightning bolts. Little Macintosh out of its sheath. Velvet Remedy stepped forward, horn aimed. "What do you want?" Damn it. We did not need this. I'd have to draw them into the forest, away from the hut and the ponies we had rescued. Couldn't risk any of them caught in the crossfire. Why the hell did this have to happen today? "You," the pretty maned Alicorn informed Velvet Remedy. "Oh, hells no," I thought fiercely. "We wish to continue, to make more of us," the Alicorn continued. "No more red-eye, no more black book. You will fix this." "You want to procreate," Velvet said slowly. It was beginning to dawn on me that the Alicorns were acting non-aggressively. I felt a little stunned. "But you have no males." "Pointing out the obvious there, Velvet. That's the problem. You will fix this." The other Alicorns echoed the statement in a rather eerie chorus. "I'm not sure I can help," I said. After all the trouble I'd gone through to eliminate the Black Book and Red Eye's hypothesis project, I didn't see an attempt to resurrect either. "Not you," the lead Alicorn said sharply, the others behind her neighing. "We know you. You are the destroyer. We do not seek your aid." I wasn't sure if I felt more relieved or offended. Mostly, I just felt protective of Velvet, my friend, whom they were clearly targeting. Velvet Remedy stared at them, slowly cocking her head, her ears swiveling. "Why me?" "We remember your compassion at Maripony," the oddly blue-maned Alicorn enlightened her. "You are the one who helps." "Habajibwa?" "We bring you the memories, so that you may fix this," the Alicorn stated, her horn glowing a frosty blue. I only now noticed that she wore a satchel, old and grotesquely stained. Her horn's glow was echoed by one surrounding the satchel, and she opened it and levitated out a pipbuck that looked like a puddle or a bundle of gore-encrusted wires without attachments, including a mechanical eye. Velvet Remedy gasped, taking an involuntary step back as the Alicorn floated them towards her. "So," I said slowly, realizing what I was seeing. Something of Red-Eye survived, after all. Red-Eye had been dying when he fell into the vat, yes, but he wasn't dead, yet. and who knew how long the cyberpony's enhancements would prolong the dying process. And this was Red-Eye. Of course he had an escape plan. I had given him plenty of time before the Star Blaster bomb went off. Not that it did him much good. Those were Red-Eye cybernetics. He had been harvested. I felt sick. We found his corpse in the dragon lair. One of the other alicorns, a purple, claimed. I fought to shove back the bile in my throat. As wicked as Red-Eye was, this was a desecration he didn't deserve. Instead, I tried to latch onto the more sterile facts the alicorns were presenting. That made sense. The Journal of Dr. Glue mentioned passages beneath the cathedral, and the dragon had been living in there somewhere. That would explain how it appeared so suddenly in the middle of the battle, and why Dr. Glue's request to use the tunnels to dump bodies of his victims had received such low accommodation. He had made it that far, another alicorn explained, before dying from his wounds, and from the holy liquid. Bella was staring at the machines torn out of Red-Eye's head with horror and revulsion. I almost expected her to faint, but when had she ever done that? Memories, the alicorn had said. Red-Eye was recording everything, all his research, all his actions. Everything. His cybernetics were akin to a black opal. The massive storage capacity of the Pitbuck would probably store days' worth of his memories. For the rest, he'd need multiple mainframes. I'd seen nothing like that in the cathedral, but this was the stallion whose other headquarters was in the Ministry of Morale hub in Philadelphia. If any building would have a setup to store that much spying. Damn. That explained the Sprite-Bots too. He was probably using them to transmit his memories back to Philadelphia hub. I'd guessed before that he must know the real function of those robots, but I never envisioned he'd be utilizing them like that. Velvet Remedy squeezed her eyes shut and shook her head forcibly. No. A small blob of meaty red dripped off one of the wires. The alicorns whined and stomped. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Calamity flying up, battle saddle on. Life Bloom was galloping behind them. Velvet turned a softer gaze to them. I mean, yes, she told them gently. I will help you, but not like this. There is another way? The frost-maned alicorn asked her, her voice surprised. There has to be, Velvet Remedy assured her, reaching up a hoof to touch the alicorn's face. And together, we will find it. Calamity landed, his eyes darting between Velvet Remedy and the alicorns. Leaning close to me, he whispered loudly. So, they ain't gonna attack us? I really had no words. The alicorn heard him, not that doing so was much of a feat, and she shifted her gaze towards him, as did half the other. We have learned, she had admonished Calamity. Siding with those who oppose the Destroyer and her friends leads to failure. I blinked. My own previous thoughts about the alicorns resurfaced in my mind. They never fell for the same trap twice. Today. Hold the line, the Steel Ranger shouted, his armor speeding through the reloading cycle, as he crouched behind the rubble that until 10 minutes ago had still been a mostly intact Java's Cup. Those winged bastards get no closer than stable tech. Than right here. The zhouching sound and the smell of ozone, melted metal, and boiled flesh told him that he had just lost one more of his soldiers. Knights, all of them. Too young and too unprepared to be fighting for their home against the enemies like this. The reload cycle finished just as the squad of black carapace-wearing ponies flew overhead. The Steel Ranger launched 2 missiles and watched them home in on their targets, blowing the Enclave invader out of the sky. The rest of the squad broke apart, swooping back to strike at him from all angles. He couldn't get them all, so he focused on the ones in front and to his left, opening up with a grenade machine gun. He had a clip of magical energy grenades scavenged from one of the patrols. Of these bitches, his squad had been taken down before. No better time to use them than the present. So he was rather shocked when one of the Enclave attackers closing in on his right was ripped from the sky with an anti-armor grenade fire. The Enclave ponies banked sharply away, reassessing the new threat. The Steel Ranger turned to see another Earth pony in magically powered armor, standing on the ridge of rubble across the street. Armor identical to his, except that it was painted in bands of rich apple red. Without a word, the Steel Ranger turned away from Applejack's Ranger, focusing on the enemy. The Applejack's Ranger galloped in, shifting to cover his blind spots. The two of them fought together, side by side, until the ground ripped open beneath them, pouring forth Enclave helmeted hellhounds. 2 days ago. Dawn began to break on the horizon, sending streams of smoke-altering light through the trees. The flowers began to dim, their translucent green petals no longer appearing, but still no less delicate. The forest awoke silently. All the sounds of nature stilled, the creatures of the forest driven out or burned alive by the fires, their ghosts offering no sounds. After Velvet Remedy had spoken with them a little longer, the Alicorns departed as swiftly as they had arrived. Or, at least, I thought they did. The lead Alicorn's horn glowed a frosty blue, and the group of them blurred, then vanished from sight. "Whoa, Nelly!" Calamity whined. "We knew the blue ones could turn invisible, but they could never turn the other Alicorns visible too." "They're learning," I said, feeling equally shocked. "Growing." Velvet's eyes widened at a realization. They haven't even begun to see their potential. There was a moment of silence as this new reality sunk in. Then one by one, we started back towards Zikora's hut, the earthbound Calamity trotting slowly next to Velvet Remedy as she took the lead. Little Pip. It was Lifebloom. He had fallen behind, and from the sounds of it, he wanted to talk to me. It was turning out to be that sort of day. "Yes?" "I've been thinking about how you claimed you had a way to deal with the impending food crisis," he began. "There's a food production megaspell, isn't there?" "What the? How did he?" "It's the only thing that makes sense." I hadn't told any pony about this, except for Homage, and I had only breached my promise to Spike with her because she would be one of the element bearers, and I hadn't dared tell Red Eye. "Or maybe a poison cleansing megaspell," he considered. "If you purge all the poison from Sweet Apple Acres, you could feed a lot of ponies. Not nearly enough, but it would be a start." Twilight Society. Of course. They did have access to much of Twilight Sparkle's spell research, including several of the spells that were woven in to the Guardians of Equestria. "Something like that," I admitted, trying to be intentionally vague enough to not betray Spike and Equestria's most valuable secret. "Yes." "I'd like to see it," he said next. "No," I replied swiftly. I quickly explained, "It's not my place to show it. That's up to someone else." Then added, "It's guarded." "Ah," he said. I began walking again, but he stopped me. "You're not planning to just shut down the Single Pegasus project, are you?" He looked at me seriously, his voice taking a slight edge. "You're not planning on coming back, Are you? Was it that obvious? Part of me wants to hug you and proclaim you my hero for what you are about to do. Lightbloom granted. But part of me wants to drop you, to keep you paralyzed until I can hoof deliver you to Homage, so she can buck some sense into you. I almost wished he would. It'd be so much easier if this choice were taken from me. Some pony has to stay inside that place, I explained to him instead. The only way the Enclave will stop trying to eliminate every pony who could possibly take over the central hub is if it's taken over. And not just for a moment. Lightbloom nickered. Well, maybe I'm just thinking with my friendship here, but have you thought about what this will do to Homage? His voice was cross. She's already lost Joke Blue. What do you think this will do to her? My heart seized painfully. This will destroy her. He stomped the ground for emphasis. I rounded on him, my face scrunched in eternal pain as my feelings of loss shifted into gut-wrenching adherence at myself. I know. I felt the first of many tears. I stared back into his eyes, my vision blurred hotly. But what if I don't? If I selfishly put the two of us above the wasteland and leave Equestria suffering for it? I answered for him. She'll lose her faith in heroes, maybe even in the good fight itself, and she'll blame herself for it. Lightbloom looked stricken. I'm not going to betray her, cause, and the reason she loves me, just to keep her. My words were a knife. That would destroy her too. That would destroy her worse. I was betraying Homage with my choice, yes. That would be far more horrible betrayal. Homage deserves better, and I was losing someone I had never deserved. Lightbloom swallowed, and turned his gaze away, ashamed. I frowned somberly. Besides, I can only get one pony in, myself, and I'll have to be locked into that machine, put into an artificial coma, in order to run it. I looked up at the smoke-tainted clouds, visible through the treetops. I need to analyze the towers in the Pegasus farmlands. Set off only the right towers. I can't do that by just throwing a switch. Lightbloom considered that for a good while. He was so quiet, I didn't think he would speak again. I had almost started back, noting that the Hellhound was once again in the open doorway of Zeccora's hut, this time having waylaid Calamity and Velvet Remedy. We have to do better, don't we? He asked in a small voice. You are right. And you were right, he continued, finding a little more strength. We've done almost nothing to help. The Twilight Society. We've sat back, hoarding our secrets, telling ourselves, hell, we're virtually the Enclave in miniature. I swiveled around to see the crimson and scarlet-maned white unicorn staring at the dirt, downcast. Even my joining you was little more than a token. In the Cora's doorway, the cybernetic Hellhound was dangling my undrunken Sparkle Cola Rad in front of Calamity's snout. We hardly deserving of the name we have taken. Lightbloom looked up. His eyes, only his eyes, as tear-filled as my own. We have to do better. We owe it. You and Homage, you've done so much, so freely. Hell, you're giving up yourself for all of us. He paused, seeming unsure of what to say from there. I merely nodded, turning my tail on him and trotting off. As much as my heart felt like it would be put through the blender, this was good. I needed Lightbloom thinking this way. I had a plan. And without Homage, it would be up to him alone to convince the Twilight Society to do their part. Today. The ancient ritual chamber within Temponi Tower was alive with light for the first time in over 200 years. It had been 2 centuries since the megaspell known as Celestia I had been activated. The ponies inside had ignored the destruction of the city around them, intent instead on bringing the full power of the sun itself down on those zebra lands and the coastal lands that those equestrian ponies believed held the launch sites for the bulk of Zebra's long-range megaspell missiles. The last time the chamber was used, entire islands had been plunged back into boiling oceans. The last attack had lasted less than half an hour before the Pegasi had closed off the sun. Now, once again, sunlight poured down through the artificial chimney, through a wall of multi-faceted mirrors that caught and reflected the glow of Celestia's sun, bouncing it down into the bleached white chamber below, filling the ritual chamber with monochromatic kaleidoscope of light and shadow. A line of robed ponies plodded into the chamber. In the lead was an older, mottled brown mare, a unicorn. Behind him, a younger, white one, with a few curls of scarlet and crimson mane poking out from beneath his hood. Each moved with purpose, striding to their positions within the intricate arcane mosaic of polished white tiles. Though not one of them had ever cast a megaspell before, and in fact, most never expected to have the opportunity to do so in their lifetime, each knew exactly what to do. This was something they had practiced by rote. But this time, they could feel the change in the air. This time, it was real. They looked at each other. A few tapped at the mosaic tiles with their hooves, or whined nervously, still not sure that they were doing was really the right thing to do.